compartmentalization of that is far more dangerous, right? Because we recognize the conditional relationship between democracy here and the preservation of domestic liberty in the States and the global preservation of democracy abroad. So as those smaller democracies collapse, it weakens the democracy and the liberties that we have in the States. So that has to be the ideological aim of any terrorist group, right? Is to, again, this lecture is too much. Okay, so enough of that. So number 4 was perceptions. All right, so what was the 9? It's not simply to prevent terror attacks, right? It's not, the cause of terror is not responsive to U.S. intimidation, if you will. It's not simply about we're responding to U.S. intimidation. That's categorically false. Okay, so the first misconception is not misconception. Sorry. The first thing to understand is that there is an ideological war on terror. It really is, right? There is a battle. There's a brains brawn battle. The second is there are misconceptions about the causes of terror. In order to understand this ideological war, you need to understand that these are not causes of terrorism. The next thing that you should recognize is what's my unique contribution to the discussion. So you're not going to find any of this in the .gov pages because this is specifically, my contribution to the brains part of the battle. Terrorism, number 3, terrorism, like genocide. Terrorism, T-R-O-R-I-S. Terrorism is grounded in an terrorism is grounded in an exclusionary ideology. Now this is where I have expertise. Right? My dissertation was, I forget the title, but it was something like on the nature of, I don't know, that's the book. I forget what it was. It's like state endorsed exclusionary ideology, blah, 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 genocide, something, right? Exclusionary ideology was in the title of my dissertation, and much of my dissertation went about explaining the relationship between an exclusionary ideology, what it is, and its relationship to genocide. I'm now recognizing, and in preparing for this lecture, I've recognized that there is an inherent relationship between the notion of an exclusionary ideology and terrorism. What I can contribute, so for those who are watching, I guess on the good guy's side, since I gave, unfortunately probably gave, ideas of, making terrorists stronger. What I can say that the good guys, quote unquote, intelligence people, in theory, that are watching my video, which I know is laughable, is that as far as exclusionary ideologies are concerned, terrorist ideology is an exclusionary ideology. So it's not like you can't dismantle it. The rules, the theory that explains exclusionary ideologies pertains to terrorism. The rules, the logic, the theory that describes the weaknesses inherent within an exclusionary ideology are the same weaknesses within a terrorist ideology. Because the argument is, if a terrorist ideology, and I'm saying not if, I'm making the statement that a terrorist ideology, tyrannical ideology, is exclusionary in its stance, and thus any weakness that an exclusionary ideology has, a terrorist ideology has to have. So what you do is you exploit that weakness in order to collapse or weaken, decay the terrorist ideology. So if it's a brains-brawn battle, that brains-brawn battle is, if it's a brains-brawn battle, then that brains-brawn battle is in part subject to an exclusionary ideology. Okay, number 1. So we're talking about exclusionary ideology. terrorism is grounded in an exclusionary ideology and therefore subject to the inherent weaknesses of any exclusionary ideology. The war on terror must seek to exploit these weaknesses, right? So I'm not a general in the sense of troop deployments and ratio and guns and blah 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 blah. I don't do that stuff. I'm the brains part of the battle against terror, and with respect to strategically approaching the ideological battle, while I recognize that there is a role in which an exclusionary ideology can be collapsed. So how do we go about doing that? And genocide scholars have been very successful in collapsing and making sense of and understanding the function that genocide plays and how exclusionary ideologies are used to justify the onslaught. Similarly, you can use that same understanding I'm arguing right now, because I don't have time to put this in a paper. I'm going to see what my workload is like, but I'm probably going to write a book about this, book length, in a little bit. The war on terror must seek to exploit these weaknesses. Exclusionary ideology, again, was what I wrote my dissertation on, and now I want to talk specifically about it. So, must exploit the inherent you must exploit the inherent weakness of any exclusionary ideology. Okay, the first thing to recognize is that when we're talking about an exclusionary ideology, all exclusionary ideologies take a dogmatic approach to truth. Right? All of these ideologies take a dogmatic approach. Right? So they take a dogmatic approach to truth. And the question is, what does it mean to say that we're taking a dogmatic approach to truth? The quick example is this. Dogma, in its strictest sense, means that there isn't a justification for actions outside of self-referential justification. My daughter comes to me, she says, "Dad, can I go outside?" I say no. She says, "Why?" I say, "Because I said so." She doesn't have a means of challenging my authority because I refer to myself as the justificatory body, right? So I say, "No, you can't go outside." She says, "Why?" I say, "Because I said so." Dogma, right? So, dogmatic approach to truth, as opposed to another source where my daughter says, "Hey, Daddy, can I go outside?" I say, "No." She says, "Why?" I say, "Because it's dark outside." She says, "Well, what's the connection between being dark outside and me not going outside?" And now we can enter into a discourse. I open up a plane, an environment in which there can be communication. In a dogmatic approach, it's my way or death, right? So, terrorism then takes a dogmatic, just like an exclusionary ideology, terrorist ideology takes a dogmatic, it has to, this is undeniable, take a dogmatic approach to truth. It's self-referential, self-justified. How do you exploit that weakness of being dogmatic? Alright, let's exploit that weakness. So, instill opposition among supporters. Embolden supporters or current members to augment their views, right? The point is, if it's the case, and it's not even if, since it's the case that terrorist ideology is an exclusionary ideology, and it's the case that all exclusionary ideologies have inherent weaknesses, then as a proponent of democratic peace theory, democracy, civil liberty, you exploit the weakness inherent in the ideology. One weakness inherent in the ideology is that it's self-referential, it's dogmatic. How do you exploit that? Members who are already affiliated with the terrorist group or potential sympathizers with the terrorist group need to have, if you will, and this seems like all of this discussion should be off the record, not in the public, but I haven't gotten the call yet to stop doing these videos. So, because nobody's watching my videos, I'm just speaking to myself. But anyway, you need to instill opposition among supporters, right? If there is an idea that here is the framework, let's just say 1 through